sky, limitless, beautiful, and deadly. The first 3 airplane crashes. September 17th, 1908, Fort Myer, Virginia. Orville Wright's fragile plane lifts into the air. Lieutenant Thomas Selfridge sits beside him, heart racing, eyes wide with wonder. Until a propeller shatters. Wood explodes, screams pierce the morning air. History turns deadly. 1 man dies. 1 legend survives, May 14th, 1910, Milledgeville, Georgia. Eugene Ely climbs into a delicate biplane. The crowd holds its breath. The wind howls, and then disaster. The plane jerks violently, twisting toward the earth. Dust, smoke, panic. A miracle. He survives. But the sky has spoken. July 19th, 1910, Rome, Italy. Captain Bertram Dickson soars above the city in his fragile Farman III. Spectators gasp as the aircraft climbs higher, then spirals out of control. Twisting, breaking, descending, and gravity is merciless. He survives, trembling, forever changed. 3 crashes, 3 continents, 3 men who dared to conquer the sky, and almost never returned. This is not just history. This is terror. This is courage. This is the birth of flight. Written in splinters, smoke, and human determination. Hold your breath, because the sky does not forgive mistakes. It was a crisp morning on September 17th, 1908, at Fort Myer, Virginia. The sun had just begun its slow ascent, casting long shadows across the military parade grounds. The air was filled with anticipation, tinged with a nervous excitement that could almost be felt in every breath. Spectators had gathered, a mixture of military personnel, engineers, journalists, and curious onlookers, all eager to witness a marvel that was still barely 2 years old. Powered, controlled flight. At the center of it all stood the Wright Model A, the invention of 2 brothers whose vision had forever altered the course of human history. Orville Wright, one of the legendary Wright brothers, adjusted the controls, his hands steady despite the gravity of the moment. Alongside him, Lieutenant Thomas E. Selfridge, a young officer of the U.S. Army, donned his helmet and goggles, unaware that he was about to become part of aviation history in a way no one could have anticipated. The plan was to conduct a routine demonstration flight, to showcase that the military could indeed utilize these machines, that humans could conquer the skies. The aircraft's engine began to whir, its small propellers slicing through the early morning air with a rhythm that was almost hypnotic. The wings, a delicate lattice of wood and fabric, held the potential for flight, yet seemed so fragile, so vulnerable to the elements. Orville signaled, and the Model A rolled forward. Slowly, it lifted, rising above the ground in a moment that would have filled the hearts of anyone witnessing it with awe. For a fleeting few seconds, everything seemed perfect. The plane floated gracefully, responding to every subtle adjustment with a precision that only the Wright brothers' genius could command. Spectators held their breaths, marveling at the seemingly impossible. But in the next instant, disaster struck. A propeller blade fractured, a tiny flaw magnified by the enormous forces at play. The aircraft shuddered violently, tilting and twisting in ways that no pilot could have fully anticipated. Orville fought desperately to regain control, his fingers gripping the controls, his mind racing through every scenario he had rehearsed. But the forces were too great, the machine too delicate. The Model A plunged toward the earth, the ground rushing up to meet it. The crash was immediate and catastrophic. Twisted metal and splintered wood littered the field. Smoke rose, mingling with the cries of those who had watched in horror. Lieutenant Thomas E. Selfridge had suffered a fatal injury, struck in the head by debris. He became the first human being to die in a powered airplane crash. Orville Wright survived, though badly injured, a testament to both luck and skill. He had witnessed the fragility of flight, the razor-thin line between triumph and tragedy. This day, once intended to demonstrate the possibilities of aviation, became a sobering reminder of its risks. The aftermath was filled with grief, shock, and a profound sense of urgency. Military officials, engineers, and fellow aviators poured over the wreckage, seeking answers. How could a propeller fail? Could the aircraft be strengthened? How could future pilots be protected? Questions poured in, demanding not only technical solutions, but also a deeper understanding of what human beings were attempting to do. This crash marked a turning point in aviation. It demonstrated in stark terms that flight was not merely an adventure or a spectacle. It was a dangerous endeavor that required meticulous engineering, careful planning, and respect for the unforgiving laws of physics. Safety protocols were non-existent, regulations were minimal, and yet humanity was being forced to confront the realities of powered flight head-on. The tragedy of Lieutenant Selfridge's death did not halt the pursuit of flight. Instead, it ignited a renewed commitment to innovation and safety. Propellers were redesigned, materials strengthened, and training methods for pilots refined. Every subsequent accident would build upon these lessons, creating a foundation for the astonishing achievements in aviation that would follow in the decades ahead. But beyond the technical considerations, the crash at Fort Myer also resonated on a human level. It was a story of courage, of ambition, and of the human desire to explore the unknown. Orville Wright, bruised and battered, continued his work, embodying the resilience required to turn tragedy into progress. The spectators who had witnessed the crash carried the memory with them, spreading awareness of both the promise and the peril of flight. The Fort Myer crash stands as a poignant symbol in aviation history, a moment when humanity's reach exceeded its grasp, when the thrill of achievement collided with the stark reality of mortality. It is a story that reminds us that every technological advance comes at a cost, and that the pioneers who dare to push the boundaries often pay the highest price. Yet, from this tragedy, aviation learned its first lessons. Flight would never be the same again. The fragility of early aircraft, the vulnerabilities of pilots, and the unpredictable nature of flight forces became lessons etched in the consciousness of engineers and aviators alike. It was a harsh education, one that would save countless lives in the future by informing better designs, safer procedures, and greater awareness of the risks involved. Today, when we marvel at the effortless glide of modern airplanes, we often forget the perilous beginnings that made such feats possible. The crash of September 17, 1908, is more than a historical footnote. It is a testament to human courage and resilience, to the relentless pursuit of dreams despite the ever-present threat of failure. Lieutenant Selfridge's sacrifice, Orville Wright's perseverance, and the lessons learned from the wreckage of the Wright Model A continue to echo through the corridors of aviation history. It reminds us, fundamentally, that progress is rarely linear, that the sky, as alluring and boundless as it may be, demands respect. That innovation, no matter how brilliant, carries with it responsibility, and that the story of flight is inseparable from the stories of those who dared to attempt it, to challenge gravity, and to transform the impossible into reality. The first fatal airplane crash, witnessed by a handful of military personnel and curious onlookers, set the stage for every advance that followed. It was a story of brilliance and tragedy, a harsh lesson that reshaped the way humans approach the sky. And though Lieutenant Selfridge would never see the heights that Orville Wright and future aviators would reach, his name became forever etched in the annals of history, a reminder of both the cost and the courage inherent in humanity's quest to conquer the skies. The morning air in Milledgeville, Georgia on May 14, 1910 was filled with anticipation. It was a time when the world still marveled at the possibility of human flight, a period when powered machines that could lift from the earth were not yet taken for granted. The townsfolk had gathered at an open field, their eyes reflecting a mixture of excitement, curiosity, and a slight unease. Among them stood engineers, journalists, and spectators who had traveled miles to witness an event that promised to push the boundaries of what was considered possible. Eugene Ely, a man known for his daring spirit and pioneering feats, approached his Wright biplane with a calm yet resolute demeanor. Ely was no stranger to risk. His name had already become synonymous with the burgeoning field of aviation. Yet the moment demanded respect. The Wright biplane, delicate in its construction, rested on the grass like a fragile bird awaiting release. Its wooden frame, taut fabric wings, and exposed engine reflected the early, unrefined stage of flight, a stark contrast to the sleek airplanes that would dominate the skies in decades to come. With careful precision, Ely inspected every joint, every cable, every propeller. The spectators held their breath, aware that even a minor miscalculation could result in disaster. The biplane roared to life, the propellers spinning with a rhythmic vibration that seemed to echo through the field. Ely climbed into the cockpit, his hands steady on the rudder and control levers. The machine trembled under the force of its own engine, and then, with a graceful lurch, it lifted off the ground. For a fleeting moment, it seemed as though the biplane defied gravity effortlessly, rising into the Georgia sky with an elegance that belied its raw, exposed construction. Children pointed, women gasped, and men exchanged nods of approval and awe. Yet, even in those first seconds of airborne triumph, the precariousness of early flight became apparent. Suddenly, the aircraft faltered. A subtle misalignment in the control surfaces or a mechanical hiccup caused the biplane to wobble. Ely fought to stabilize it, adjusting the rudder, pulling at the controls with every ounce of his strength. But the machine was at the mercy of both its mechanical limitations and the unpredictability of the wind. The plane lurched violently, and the crowd gasped as it plummeted toward the ground. The crash was dramatic but merciful in its outcome. Ely survived, shaken and bruised, his heart pounding from the shock. The biplane, however, was severely damaged. Splintered wood, torn fabric, and scattered debris littered the field. Witnesses rushed to help, their faces etched with concern and fascination. The crash, while not fatal, became a defining moment in early aviation, a reminder that human ambition was continually colliding with the limits of contemporary engineering. In the days following the crash, newspapers recounted the event with a mixture of drama and admiration. Ely's survival was celebrated as much as the daring flight itself. Aviation enthusiasts analyzed every detail: the fragile construction of the biplane, the responsiveness of the controls, and the critical moments leading to the near catastrophe. Engineers and inventors drew lessons from the incident, recognizing the urgent need to improve stability, enhance control mechanisms, and refine pilot training. Ely's experience also illuminated the human aspect of early flight. The emotional and psychological demands placed upon aviators were immense. A pilot had to anticipate every variable: the behavior of the machine, the capriciousness of the wind, and the effects of human fatigue and stress. Survival depended not only on skill but also on quick reflexes, intuition, and a willingness to embrace the inherent dangers of being among the first to conquer the skies. This crash, though less tragic than the Fort Myer disaster 2 years earlier, reinforced a crucial truth: innovation comes with risk, and the path to progress is often lined with the scars of trial and error. Each miscalculation, each malfunction, was not merely a setback but a lesson etched into the collective knowledge of the aviation community. The Milledgeville crash also highlighted the societal fascination with flight. Crowds were drawn to the spectacle, not just for entertainment but for a glimpse into the future. Ely's flight represented hope, daring, and the audacity of human ambition. It symbolized a world on the brink of transformation, where the limits of human mobility and freedom were being redefined. Eugene Ely would continue to push boundaries in aviation. His later achievements, including being the first pilot to take off from and land on a ship, would cement his place in history as a fearless innovator. Yet this crash in Georgia remained a pivotal chapter. An early encounter with the dangers that every pioneer of flight would inevitably face. The crash also reinforced the importance of meticulous preparation and engineering foresight. Every bolt, every wire, every hinge on the biplane became an object of scrutiny. Designers began to appreciate the need for redundancy, for stronger materials, and for improved aerodynamics. The lessons learned in Milledgeville would resonate far beyond Georgia, influencing the design and construction of airplanes across the United States and Europe. Ely's ordeal also had a profound impact on pilot culture. He demonstrated that courage was inseparable from humility. Even the most skilled aviator must respect the machine and the environment in which it operates. The early 20th century was a period of exhilarating progress, but it was also a time of sobering reminders that the sky was an unforgiving domain. In retrospect, the 1910 Milledgeville crash was more than a near-fatal accident. It was a defining moment in the evolution of aviation safety, engineering, and public perception. It reminded the world that the dream of flight was fragile, yet irresistible. The incident also highlighted the resilience and determination of aviators like Ely, whose willingness to face danger head-on accelerated the development of safer, more reliable aircraft. The story of Eugene Ely and his Wright biplane in Milledgeville is a testament to the indomitable human spirit. It underscores the delicate balance between ambition and caution, innovation and risk. Every flight he undertook, every challenge he embraced, contributed to a broader understanding of aviation and paved the way for generations of pilots to follow. The lessons of this crash echo even today. Modern aircraft are marvels of engineering, and strict safety protocols ensure that passengers can fly across continents with remarkable security. Yet none of this would have been possible without the early pioneers who faced uncertainty, danger, and sometimes catastrophe, all in pursuit of the dream of flight. Eugene Ely's near-fatal crash in Milledgeville reminds us that progress is often built on the courage to attempt the impossible, the resilience to survive failure, and the wisdom to learn from it. It is a story of humanity reaching beyond its limitations, of the delicate yet unstoppable march toward mastering the skies, and of the enduring legacy of those who dared to be first. On a bright July morning in 1910, the city of Rome was already alive with the sounds of bustling streets and the hum of everyday life. Yet, in a large open field on the outskirts of the city, a different kind of anticipation filled the air, one charged with excitement, curiosity, and a subtle thread of fear. Captain Bertram Dickson, a Scottish aviator and a daring pioneer in European aviation, prepared to make history. The Farman III biplane he had chosen for this flight was a marvel of early engineering. Delicate wooden wings stretched over taut fabric, an exposed engine rumbling, and intricate cables controlling the rudimentary flight surfaces. Captain Dickson, wearing leather helmet and goggles, inspected every inch of the biplane. His hands moved with experience and precision, checking joints, control levers, and the engine's delicate mechanisms. Around him, a small crowd of spectators, journalists, and fellow aviators watched with a mix of awe and anxiety. Flight was still a novelty in Europe, and each airborne attempt carried the weight of wonder, risk, and ambition. The Farman III roared to life, the engine vibrating through its wooden frame, producing a sound that seemed almost alive, pulsing with energy and tension. Dickson climbed into the cockpit, his fingers gripping the controls, eyes scanning the sky for any signs of wind or turbulence. With a careful push of the throttle, the biplane began to roll across the field, lifting gracefully into the air, the wings flexing slightly under the strain. For a moment, it seemed as though the machine defied gravity effortlessly, soaring above the Roman landscape, a tiny bird against the expansive blue sky. But the early promise of flight was precarious. The Farman III, though expertly crafted, was vulnerable to even minor mechanical imperfections. As Dickson maneuvered, a sudden failure in the control cables caused the biplane to wobble dangerously. He fought to stabilize it, twisting the rudder, adjusting the control wires with every ounce of skill he possessed. Yet the fragile machine, at the mercy of both human and mechanical limitations, began an uncontrolled descent. The crash was dramatic. The wooden wings splintered upon impact, fabric tearing and flapping in the breeze. The engine, now silent, lay twisted among the wreckage. Dickson himself emerged, bruised and shaken, but miraculously alive. Witnesses rushed forward, their faces a mixture of relief and shock. Though the biplane was damaged beyond immediate repair, the incident marked Europe's first major documented airplane crash with serious injury. In the aftermath, the significance of the accident was quickly recognized. Engineers and aviators examined the wreckage meticulously, studying the cables, joints, and engine components to determine the cause. The incident highlighted the urgent need for stronger materials, improved control mechanisms, and better understanding of flight dynamics. Lessons learned in Rome would resonate across Europe, influencing the design of subsequent aircraft and shaping the early protocols for pilot safety. Captain Dickson's crash also illuminated the human side of early aviation. The courage required to step into such a machine, knowing its fragility and the unpredictability of the skies, was immense. Pilots of this era had to combine skill, intuition, and sheer nerve, understanding that every ascent carried the potential for disaster. Dickson's survival, while fortunate, underscored both the risks and the resilience of those who dared to be first. The European aviation community took note. Articles, journals, and personal accounts chronicled the crash, emphasizing both the hazards and the promise of flight. Dickson's experience became a case study, illustrating the delicate balance between human ambition and mechanical reliability. Aviation schools and manufacturers began to implement improvements, reinforcing wings, tightening control systems, and considering redundancy in critical components. The crash also influenced public perception. Rome, like many cities in Europe, had witnessed flight as a spectacle, a thrilling, almost magical event. Yet the fragility of early aircraft and the visible danger to pilots brought home the reality that flight was not merely entertainment. It was a serious, often perilous endeavor. Citizens, while fascinated, began to understand that innovation demanded respect for both the machine and the pilot. Captain Dickson himself embodied the pioneering spirit. Though shaken, he continued his work, refining his skills, advising engineers, and advocating for safer flight practices. His ordeal became an educational moment, shaping not only his own approach but also the broader understanding of aviation risk management. The European aviation scene was still in its infancy, but lessons like those from Rome accelerated progress, ensuring that knowledge gained from accidents translated into safer, more reliable aircraft. The 1910 Rome crash also illustrated a broader truth about early aviation, that progress is inseparable from trial and error, that human curiosity and ambition often collide with the unforgiving laws of physics, and that failure, when met with analysis and adaptation, becomes a catalyst for growth. Each splintered wing, each torn fabric panel, each shaken pilot contributed to the collective knowledge that would eventually make air travel routine and relatively safe. In reflection, the story of Captain Bertram Dickson's crash is more than an isolated event. It is emblematic of the era. Europe, like America, was witnessing the birth of a new frontier. Pilots were explorers, machines were fragile vessels, and the sky was a domain that demanded respect and understanding. Dickson's resilience, the lessons learned from the Farman III, and the careful documentation of the incident all played crucial roles in advancing aviation technology and safety. This early crash, like those before it, also reminds us of the intimate connection between human courage and technological development. Without pilots willing to take the risk, without engineers willing to experiment, the marvels of modern flight might have been delayed by decades. Each accident, each near disaster, provided the data, the insight, and the motivation to improve. Today, when planes soar effortlessly over cities like Rome, it is easy to forget the fragility of their ancestors. The Farman III, the Wright biplanes, the crashes, and the near tragedies form the foundation upon which aviation's successes were built. Captain Bertram Dickson's ordeal is a testament to the bravery and vision of early aviators, men who faced uncertainty with determination, who risked injury and death to explore the skies, and who left an enduring legacy for generations to follow. In sum, the crash of July 19, 1910 in Rome was a milestone in European aviation history. It taught engineers, pilots, and the public invaluable lessons about mechanical reliability, pilot preparedness, and the inherent dangers of early flight. But beyond the technical, it highlighted the indomitable human spirit, the courage to attempt the impossible, and the willingness to learn from failure. Captain Dickson's story, marked by courage, resilience, and perseverance, continues to inspire those who look skyward, dreaming of flight, and reminds us that every success in aviation rests upon the sacrifices and lessons of the pioneers who dared to soar first.